Silver Stacker here. Hope you're doing well. Welcome to another Smart Silver Stacker live stream. So, we're going to talk about China and a new plan out of Congress to deter China from attacking Taiwan and why this could have some rather ominous implications for the US dollar moving forward. Excuse me, you'll have to bear with me in today's video. I'm still a little under the weather. You can probably hear it in my voice, but I wanted to do this video because there's a number of factors at play here which lead me to believe this is perhaps a bigger risk than previously we had imagined. And we're going to get into the debt deal that was reached recently, or it hasn't been reached yet, but they've come to an agreement in terms of what to move forward with. So it appears that the debt saga, the debt ceiling saga, is coming to an end. And I'm going to talk about that as well and why it looks like that leaves the door open for significant defense spending moving forward, defense in quotes. So this past Wednesday, the House China Committee, they advanced 10 bipartisan recommendations for deterring a Chinese attack against Taiwan. And I want to go over those kind of in detail and explain why I believe it could have some significant impacts on the purchasing power of the US dollar, possibly the world reserve status of the dollar. But before we get into that list, let's talk just a little bit about this debt deal that has been reached. And if you're joining us here, thank you so much for tuning into this live stream. Please do smash that like button, consider subscribing to the channel, and feel free to say hello in the chat, ask any questions you might have, any topics you might like me to touch on. I try to read the chat in all of these. Jaden Kutz with the super chat. Thank you very much, sir. Welcome to the stream. Okay, so this debt deal that McCarthy and Biden seem to have kind of hammered out, I've been expecting that they would raise the debt ceiling. Now, this does still have to pass Congress, but the details of this show that this is basically just more status quo stuff. I mean, we're going to continue to see significant amounts of spending. The basic gist of this, although again, I mean, I guess this still could get fine-tuned because it has to get through Congress, but the deal is that they will be capping federal spending for 2 years, putting some budget caps in place. They'll be reducing some small areas of discretionary spending by, tens of billions of dollars, really just chump change in the grand scheme of things. And the big cuts here are that there were programs that were set to be cut, or rather set to expand, but now they're not going to expand. They won't spend more money on these programs. So that's what they call spending cuts. And again, this is just kind of more of the same. But there is one very critical detail of this deal that has been reached, which I want to touch on. And that is that it only caps non-defense spending. So defense spending, they can continue to spend as much money as they want on defense and on warfare. And that has a lot to do with this proposed China plan, I think. This proposed plan for deterring a Chinese attack on Taiwan. And we can go ahead and get into that now because there is significant room for this to cause a lot of inflation, I believe, moving forward. So the talking points here that the China Committee put forward, now this would still need to get attached to the 2024 Defense Authorization Act, but that's what they want. Essentially, this is a 10-point list, but the big gist of this is they want to arm Taiwan. They want to spend money now, provide weapons for Taiwan, because unlike Ukraine, there's not a land border for Taiwan. So they think in the event that there is a attack by China on Taiwan and we need to get them weapons, we won't have the opportunity, so we need to arm them ahead of time. And so, that's one reason that we're going to be spending a lot of money on warfare and defense moving forward. This is a story here that was published on May 26 about top Pentagon officials claiming that China would not communicate. They would refuse talks, refuse requests for meetings between the Secretary of Defense, regional commanders, civilian Department of Defense employees. So, this is the kind of scenario where we could see conflict break out over Taiwan, where there's this lack of communication. We've got this brinksmanship taking place in the South China Sea over Taiwan, and now China is refusing to communicate, and lack of open communication channels could certainly lead to some miscommunication there. Now, back to this story about the recommendation. So the first one is to arm up the Taiwanese now, to give them, billions of dollars worth of weapons. So spend more money. The other one is to authorize multi-year weapons contracts for Taiwan. So not only giving them a one-time boost of weapons, but authorizing billions of dollars over the years to continually arm them up, get them more armed, get them more precision guided missiles, anything they might need to defend themselves from a Chinese invasion. It also recommends having more troops, more coordinated training between U.S. allies surrounding Taiwan. There was a recommendation to have additional cybersecurity measures in place in the U.S. So, that's another reason that you want to be getting into hard assets is if we do get a conflict breaking out, it likely is going to be massively inflationary. Warfare is one of the most inflationary endeavors a nation can take on. But also, it looks like this time around, cybersecurity and cyber warfare could become a major component of any future conflict. And so, do you really want to have all of your assets on an electronic trading platform or in an electronic bank deposit? You may find yourself unable to access those assets should a conflict break out. But here's the really big one. The major reason that this risks creating significant inflation is because I got to find this recommendation here in their quote, but they essentially want to prepare with allies to have economic warfare against China. And I'm sorry for scrolling endlessly here again, folks. I'm sorry. I'm trying to keep up with my voice here. It's a little bit tough. I'm getting over the worst of this thing, but still feeling it a little bit in my voice. Yeah, bolstering U.S. cybersecurity. Here we go. Planning with U.S. allies to impose diplomatic and economic costs on China in the event of a Taiwan attack, and including India in NATO plus. So they include some Asian U.S. allies in this NATO plus group, but the big part there is the economic warfare against China. Because, if you think that the supply chain issues that we have faced over the past several years have been troublesome, if we invoke sanctions against China, which it looks like that's the plan, according to these new recommendations from the House Committee on China, that will really cause that element of inflation, the supply chain disruptions, to dwarf anything we have experienced so far. I mean, when you go to the big box store, when you go to your Walmart or your Target or wherever you shop where they sell, manufactured goods, probably ones that are made in China, when you look at the tags on those goods, you see a lot of made in China. Very rarely do you see, for example, a made in Russia tag. And yet you saw what the sanctions against Russia have done to global supply chains. So imagine if the world's largest manufacturing hub, China, has sanctions imposed upon it. Not to mention that also, if sanctions against Russia were enough to cause nations around the world to consider dumping the U.S. dollar, if that is contributing to the de-dollarization trend around the world, the Chinese economy is massive compared to Russia's. Imagine the global response if they saw us sanction an entity like China. The de-dollarization knock-on effects of a move like that would be almost hard to imagine. Oh, I did want to mention also, guys, I've got an unboxing for you today. I'm going to do at the end of the video once we finish chatting about China and hyperinflation. So stick around for that. I got some silver here from SD Bullion. And let me know in the chat right now if you've bought into this pullback that we've seen in the precious metals. We're still seeing silver under 24 bucks. Although it'll be interesting to see what happens to the price of silver when trading begins this evening. Is trading going to begin this evening? I guess it will for international markets. I'm not sure with the Memorial Day holiday, but see how the precious metals react to this debt deal news. It will be very interesting to see that. But I've got some stuff that I'll be showing you here in just a few minutes. This is a chart I mentioned in a recent video, but this is the Atlanta Fed's sticky price CPI tracker. And you can see this orange line here, excuse me, is the sticky CPI. So that is elements of inflation and of the CPI that tend not to fluctuate much over time. It's also what you would consider structural inflation. It has to do with things like supply chain disruptions, for example. But you can see that that remains persistently high. And if we see a conflict with China break out, it is very likely that this orange component of the CPI will be moving significantly higher. And then the flexible CPI, that's kind of more the seasonal or the cyclical element of inflation. You can see it just came down. So that means that eventually it is going to be heading back up. And the combination means much higher inflation moving forward. And if we see this plan from Congress executed, it will have a negative impact on the purchasing dollar for, those three reasons. The first one is that it means we're going to be spending a lot of money on weapons. We are going to be spending billions of dollars. I mean, we're already spending billions of dollars arming Ukraine, for example. So, that's just going to be compounded by the need now to arm Taiwan. And, this debt deal, if it's not going to rein in defense spending, it's kind of a meaningless thing. Yes. Yeah, I know the camera constitutional stacker. I don't know what it is. Somebody said turn off the autofocus. Not sure how to do that within YouTube live streaming. So I'm just going to hold this coin up here so it stops wanting to focus on everything. Sorry about that. Yeah, it was made in China. Probably. Actually, on that note, let's look at this real quick. This is a story from Forbes published in February about how U.S. trade with China actually increased last year. And here are the top 10 imported items. I wanted to mention this because this gives you an idea of what might become a lot more expensive if we get into a conflict with China and we implement this economic warfare. So here are the top 10 most imported products from China, according to Forbes. Smartphones, $50.2 billion. So if your phone breaks and you have to buy a new one, and the price of the phone has doubled or tripled or quadrupled because we can no longer import them from China, that is going to be a real hardship. And I know you might think, well, a smartphone's kind of a luxury. Not really this day and age. I mean, a lot of jobs, a lot of careers require access to a smartphone. So, that could be a real problem. Automatic digital processing machines. I'm sure that a lot of businesses rely on those. So businesses see their costs for equipment go up because they can't import from China any longer and they have to get some more expensive alternative, or there's a shortage which drives prices up. Expect them to pass those costs on to consumers. Okay, wheeled toys, inflatable balls, puzzles, and scale models. So Christmas will be a lot more expensive. Video game consoles and console parts, same deal. Machines to transmit, convert, and receive voices, images, and other data. Also, again, that sounds like something businesses are in need of. It's going to make businesses have to pass on higher inflationary costs to consumers, to the end user. Lithium ion batteries, number 6, $7.3 billion. Well, a lot of things operate on lithium ion batteries. And who knows, maybe if we can't import smartphones from China anymore, maybe there will become a big market for refurbished ones and older ones, but you need new batteries for those phones. And if you can't get the battery packs, again, these seem like, not critical things, but a lot of people buy smartphones. They buy them regularly. I mean, obviously I need a phone upgrade. Look at the camera on mine. So I better do that soon before a conflict breaks out and the price goes sky high. You know what I mean? Monitors for automatic data processing machines, again, businesses. Pharmaceuticals, that's a pretty critical one. If you depend on pharmaceuticals of any kind, you might want to do a little research onto where those are coming from, because they're coming from China, you might need to look at some alternatives or the ability to perhaps stockpile things. I mean, I know that's not possible with all medications. A lot of them have a shelf life, so if you are dependent on that, that's something you need to be aware of. Accessories for computers and other data processors, and then number 10, plastic items. So yeah, anything plastic. I mean, look around your house. There's a lot of things made of plastic, very likely, and I mean, I can't name how many things use plastic. It's like every manufactured good that you ever purchase, or a lot of them anyway. So, it's not like you look at that list and you think, well, I just won't buy a smartphone or I just won't buy, plastic stuff. But those costs, they disperse throughout the economy. When you're talking about something like plastic, I mean, there's so many ways that could raise the prices for other goods. Maybe crates that hold fruit, become more expensive, and now fruit rises in price. This is just, an example off the top of my head. But the point is, that recommendation here is to have a plan in place for economic warfare against China. If that goes into effect, it's going to be a serious problem. I'm going to lower the camera a little bit here and see if that helps out with this focus issue. Missing the show because I'm watching ads. I don't know why YouTube would play ads mid live stream. That's strange. I've never seen that. I'll have to take a look at my ad settings. Excuse me. Let me have a sip of a beverage here, and then we'll get to that unboxing. But yeah, anyway, war with China means de-dollarization, inflation, and supply chain issues. Just keep that in mind. So that's why you might want to be getting into some hard assets, some inflation hedges. Also, anything that you buy that gets made in China, you might want to stock up on it now. I don't know what gets made in China. Maybe just look at disposable things like razors or what have you. Anything that you see that is made in China that you buy on a regular basis, you might want to have a plan to replace it with something domestically produced, or come up with some kind of an alternative, or get your hands on a bunch of it. Because if China is refusing to communicate with the U.S. through official channels, and they're doing all of these, war exercises surrounding Taiwan, and the U.S. is beefing up our defenses around there, that's another part of the plan here. There will be more economic sanctions, more warfare against China. I'm sorry, I'm bumping the camera here. But look, let's see what we got here to start us off from SD Bullion. Shout out SD Bullion. Thank you very much for sending me some silver. I mean, it's not like they sent it to me for free. I bought it, but still, nice to have it here safe and sound. And normally, I don't do these live stream unboxings, or I haven't in the past. Normally, I do these on pre-recorded videos, so we can always fast forward. So I picked up one of these Infinity rounds. This is pretty cool. This is part of the Awakening series. Never stacked one of these before, but I just thought this one was very interesting, from ST Bullion. It's about QE Infinity. So, that's basically what I think is coming next, QE Infinity, because all of this additional defense spending that we're going to see over the next couple years, it's not like we have the money. We're already broke. We're already billions and trillions of dollars in debt. Sorry. Got my illions mixed up there. No, we are already in debt up to our eyeballs, and eventually all of this debt is going to be monetized by the Federal Reserve through quantitative easing, very likely, because there's no way we can pay all of this debt off. Also got this cowboy round. This was a special. They had these on sale. It's a round from the Scottsdale Mint, so really cool. I like how they did that kind of pattern around the lion and also around the cowboy. I don't know what you call that pattern, but it's interesting how it catches the light there. Anyway, that one was really neat. And then we got, let's see, Republic Metals Corporation and RMC round. This was just a random round. I wanted to throw that in there to see what I would get. I like generic rounds. I kind of like collecting different varieties of them, and just a personal stacking thing. And I like them because they're typically relatively cheap too, and you can get variety, so they're kind of fun to look at, especially if you get something old like this. Was this a Monex round from the 1980s? This doesn't carry any specific premium to it, but I do think, if I can get the camera to focus on it, you see it there. It's very cool. It's a Monex International Silver Eagle. You know, I like the Engelhards. I like the Monex stuff. I like the stuff from the 80s, personally. I don't know, maybe just some nostalgia there. Okay, let's get into the bigger part of the unboxing here. So I already told you guys what this was when I picked it up. Uh, it's one of those, but you can probably guess. Guess in the chat. Put it in the chat if you think you know what's in this just from looking at the package. It's probably no surprise if you've been watching the channel for a while, but we'll get it open here in just a minute. And this is the fun part about doing this on a live stream is you get to see me struggling with the package. But hey, SD Bullion, I'm going to take it off camera for a minute just so I can rip it open. SD Bullion, I appreciate the very secure packaging here. Okay, there we go. Valcambi Suisse, 1 kilo bar. They had a sale on these. They sold out very quickly. I think this was something like $1.89 over spot, something like that SD Bullion had. But you got to keep an eye out for those deals in today's environment. I mean, the premiums aren't as high as they were back in March. But, you know, when you see the price pull back like we did over the past couple weeks, you see the premiums on certain products go up. It's pretty much across the board with any dealers. But if you keep an eye out for the deals, you can still get at a silver physical metal at a reasonable premium. Again, I think it was about $1.89 over spot that SD Bullion had these on sale for. So I always like to check out their deals pages. I think they still have the 2023 Britannias on sale if you want to get a sovereign coin. Frank says, I stopped buying Asahi. They refilled the Comex. Yeah, I don't know. You know, if the Comex needs silver, I guess they need it. To the fact, you know, the fact that they have physical silver is, you know, a good thing. It keeps the market running smoothly because when the day comes that the Comex doesn't get refilled, you're probably not going to be able to get your hands on any more of this stuff. So I know a lot of stackers maybe think, oh, you know, silver takes so long to have any movement. Well, I think the day's coming, you know, when a place like the Comex gets a short squeeze on silver. We get a real physical silver squeeze, but until that day comes, it's nice to have lower prices so we can stack on the cheap. Because just remember, those futures markets, a lot more silver gets traded there than actually exists. All right, Constitutional Stacker is out. Thanks for tuning in. That's pretty much all I had for you today. Do check out SD Bullion with the link down in the description if you're looking to get some physical metal like this. Also, support the other channel sponsors. Don't forget to check out Silver Botanicals and their household and personal hygiene products that are powered by nano silver. Those are awesome. They're a longtime channel sponsor. There's a link down in the description for them. You can use coupon code STACKER to save 10% off your order with them. Let's see. I feel like maybe there were a couple other stories I wanted to cover before we sign out. That's pretty much the gist of the video today. We do continue to have the geopolitical situation around the world deteriorating. This was an interesting one I saw. Iran exchanges heavy gunfire with Taliban on Afghan border, escalating tensions over water rights. Yeah, that's why they're coming to blows over there, I guess, at this border crossing in between Iran and Afghanistan. And it's interesting, you know, all the weapons that the Taliban have, billions of dollars, all funded courtesy of the U.S. They've got Black Hawk helicopters and Humvees and tons of grenade launchers and small arms that we left behind there. And so, you know, just tack that on to the huge defense spending that we, you know, have committed to around the world. Also, we've got this from the Department of Defense. I mean, you've probably seen this covered. This is from a few days ago, but we have decided now, following the G7 meeting, the U.S. and other G7 members are going to be providing F-16 training and aircraft to fill Ukraine's midterm, long-term defense needs. So again, we want to have multi-year contracts with Taiwan for providing them with weapons, all funded courtesy of the U.S. taxpayer. Nonetheless, we're also paying for weapons to go to Ukraine now, F-16s, among the other billions and billions of dollars worth of weapons that we have committed to them. So defense spending really is a huge threat to the U.S. dollar because all of this spending, I mean, yeah, they've reached this debt deal, you know, hooray. They, you know, have managed to cut spending by something like 0.02% of US GDP, cuts that probably won't even really go into effect at any time anyway. They're just capping spending moving forward, and I don't know. I just don't believe it. I think that we're going to continue to spend tons of money, even on the non-defense spending. But even if we don't, the defense spending is going to absolutely balloon. The most recent defense bill was what, $860 billion, something like that. It was a record increase in defense spending, the biggest one ever. The U.S. spends more on defense than any other country by a long shot. We're arming Ukraine, we're arming Taiwan. We're probably going to be arming Taiwan a lot more next year. And so, multi-front war can be very costly. Also, the planned economic sanctions against China in the event of a conflict are going to lead to further de-dollarization around the world when countries see even this proposed plan. I mean, it may lead to more countries being wary of the dollar as a real store of value, and also the supply chain disruptions in the event that that economic warfare plan goes into effect will be absolutely devastating and lead to much higher inflation. And I think the Fed ultimately is probably going to have to monetize all of that defense spending too. So it's a perfect storm for much higher inflation. That's why I'm still stacking hard assets like gold and silver. That's why I just picked up another kilo bar from SD Bullion. And that's just what I'm doing. It's not it's not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor or anything. I'm just a guy on YouTube. But when I see how things are playing out and I see, the way that the gold and silver price have pulled back recently and just how cheap the precious metals are, it makes me want to just get more of this stuff while it's cheap. And I think that our big regret, moving forward, will probably be just not stacking more than we did when prices were as low as they are today. Um, when will this conflict with Taiwan manifest itself? Well, there is that Air Force general, I think it was, who was saying 2025 is when he sees it playing out. If you've read The Fourth Turning, the Strauss and Hound generational theory, their idea is that we are in a fourth turning, which happens roughly every 80 years or so in U.S. history, or throughout history, even pre-U.S. But if you go back in U.S. history, you go back about 80 years, you get to World War II. You go back 80 years before that, you get the Civil War. You go back another 80 years, you get the Revolutionary War. You get the idea. And their forecast was that societal changes and this fourth turning dynamic would begin to play out in the year 2020. In that book, The Fourth Turning, it was written back in the 90s. And then they thought it would culminate in the year 2026. So this isn't something that is going to lead to the demise of the dollar, overnight. It's not something that's probably even going to happen this year. Although, when you look at that story about how the Chinese, they're refusing to communicate through official channels, you realize that this conflict could break out at any time. Probably Ukraine is going to continue to be the focus of this, defense spending, which is going to continue to ramp up for the immediate future. But over the next couple of coming years, I think that there's a real possibility for conflict with Taiwan. This is no secret. It's not like I'm the only person mentioning this. I mean, this is apparent to anybody who's paying attention, and it's hard to see how this can get resolved peacefully. I mean, the plan by the U.S. just seems to be to continue to arm Taiwan and beef up our forces there to try to enhance deterrence against the Chinese. But the Chinese are committed to retake Taiwan. Let's not make any bones about it. I mean, they consider it part of their sovereign territory. And, there is some historical basis for that, I guess. But, there's also a self-governed, people living in Taiwan. So I'm not here to pick sides on that. I'm just here to point out that from a, just a realistic point of view, looking at how things are playing out, it's very likely we're going to get involved in some kind of a conflict there. And, we're already involved in this major conflict in Ukraine. Look at what's happening between Iran and Afghanistan, for example. There's just lots of instability around the world. And the U.S. is probably going to be spending much, much more money on defense. This debt deal is just more of the same. It's not going to do anything to cut spending. It's a maintenance of the status quo, and they're just going to keep kicking the can down the road, spending more and more money, raising the debt ceiling as long as they can. But if we see something like a conflict with China break out, the day when we actually have to pay the piper for those debts and for all this profligate spending is probably going to arrive rather soon. So let me know what you think in the comments down below about all of this. Are we going to see a economic war against China the way that we have against Russia? Are we going to see Taiwan devolve into a major conflict between China and the US? It appears that we are approaching that time. And even if the US prevails in a conflict of that nature, it means that certain items and probably just items across the board, considering how much stuff we import from China, is going to get a lot more expensive, and inflation is going to be through the roof. And hard assets like gold and silver, people will say, well, gold and silver aren't inflation hedges. Well, listen, there have been a lot of currencies throughout history that have hyperinflated. A lot of reserve currencies that have lost their status. But all throughout all that history, thousands of years of this history, gold and silver have never gone to zero. So, I mean, in that sense, they have hedged the inflation. It doesn't mean that, there's going to be a perfect correlation between the loss of purchasing power in the dollar and the increase in the fiat prices of gold and silver. But what it does mean is that ultimately you have the ability to maintain some purchasing power outside of the financial system, which, one thing that's always guaranteed is that the currency is going to continue losing purchasing power. So the relative purchasing power of gold and silver, tend to go up and down. But I think that right now they're kind of low. So I anticipate that when we do get a major inflationary risk, the likes of which I don't think most people out there really understand we even could see, you're going to see a flight into the safety of the precious metals, the likes of which we've never witnessed, at least not in our lifetimes. But maybe not. It's just one possibility. There's some other compelling reasons to stack precious metals too, but I do think that in the event we see the geopolitical situation really turn to SHTF, then having some metals will be a good thing. And you need other things too. You need anything that you buy that's imported from China, for example, you might want to stock up on food and other essentials. Just increasing your ability to be sustained outside of systems of support. It may not always be that you can just go to your Amazon app and order everything that you need and have it delivered the next day. We're very spoiled with the systems that we have in place today, but that's not going to last forever. It's not guaranteed anyway. And so you got to get prepared. But leave me a comment down below again to let me know what you think. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Appreciate everybody who watches these live streams and supports the channel. Stay safe and happy stacking, and I will catch you next time. Smart Silver Stacker out.